Evelyn Van Winden, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for making time. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing fine. Doing fine
Good.
here. Thank you.
Good to hear. Glad to hear. Me and Seb have been talking about this for the last while. In fact, that we were thinking about recording maybe 6 weeks ago, but now we've made time for Seb because we want this inclusion. Um, Before we get into talking about child and adolescent psychology and attachment, do you mind telling us a bit about yourself and how you kind of got into that field?
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
Um, well, yes, tell something about myself. Well, I'm a mom and a stepmom of four children. The eldest is 24 and the youngest is 10 years old. So there's a lot of years between. Yeah, we're a blended family. So for how many years now? I came into my stepchildren's life when they were 5 and 8 years old, so many years now. Yeah. Oh, I cannot hear you anymore, Jim. Is that normal? Oh yeah.
Sorry, I just
Yeah.
put myself on mute, Evelyn. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. No problem. Okay. Okay. Um. Yeah. Well. I've been in this field. I'm a trainer and a therapist in attachment-based developmental science. So that means that I'm facilitating education to families, to parents, step parents, adoption parents, blended families, but also professionals and professionals in education and in the healthcare. And next to it, I have my own practice where where I help people to digest this paradigm and to get it into practice in their own families. And yeah, well, I do this now for 5 years. 5 years, yeah, yeah. Next to my studies, because I started studying this when in 2013. And yeah, so well, I'm busy with this paradigm for 11 years now. Yeah,
11 years.
yeah.
And because I guess it's for listeners, I came across you because I had read Hold On to Your Kids by Gordon Neufeld and Gabor Mate a few months ago. And then I went onto the website to find people who have been trained in kind of Neufeld's approach to attachment. And then I came across you and then we had our chat. I guess I'm interested because I found the book really fascinating and really helpful, even as a youth worker. But I was interested into, I guess, how did you come across Gordon Neufeld's work with around attachment, and why do you think it's so unique and why it's so helpful for parents and for people working with young people?
Yeah, well, I have to tell you a story around this because, you know, of course, there's a story why people do what they do, right? And I was 26 when I became a stepmom, and I really liked my stepchildren, and it was love at first sight. Really, I think that it was the other way around. It was also like this, but um, we liked each other, but it was not easy. You know, we had a lot of patterns in our blended family and a lot of stuff to digest. My husband was not divorced for a long time, and there was a lot of going on, and um, yeah, we got stuck, together. And I was searching a lot about motherhood, about parenthood, about blended families. So I went into the bookstores like everyone does when they have problems in their family, and nowadays they're looking on internet and on Google. And I was searching a lot and didn't find a lot about what resonates with me. There was a lot of books about what to do and what not to do, and a lot of different methods. And when my biological son was born, I really parenthood was really hard on me. It was really hard, and Well, I didn't find any answers that resonate with me, and what really got my heart. It it I couldn't find anything. So one day I got in a workshop with my now colleague, and I was just blown away. Like, does this exist? Why didn't anyone tell me about this before? And why didn't I know about child development, about what my child needs? And yeah, well, after the workshop, I just ran to her and asked her all my questions. And well, she didn't really answer my questions. I thought it was really strange, and she just recommended to read the book, Hold On to Your Kids. And I went home in the car, and I can remember complaining to my husband, like, why didn't she tell me? She got all the answers right. So I started to read the book, and it was a journey for me, really. At first, it was a personal journey because of my own turbulent background of my childhood, and after, it was about my kids and about my motherhood. So it was really life changing for me to read about some dynamics, and to read about things of the heart. It's really it's an interesting book because there is science in there, but there's also heart, and I think this combination makes it unique for me, because it's not only about what children need, but it's also about you, and coming alongside your child and yourself. It's kind of magical, I think. Yeah, what happens to you if you read this stuff? It softens your heart.
Yeah, because I love hearing you speak about it because that is a nice way of putting it. That it is based on hardcore research, but it's also based off an own his own a father's experience, parenthood experience, and with this really heavy open heart. Like really invested in what is the best for my kids and how can I protect them, because particularly now it feels that it's so hard to navigate parenthood. And when I was reading this, it just felt that even though I'm not a parent right now, it felt, oh my God, this must really help a lot of parents. Because also, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who felt like this, that even though I hadn't come across the book before, what he said, I kind of had an inclination that it was true, but I guess just the culture maybe doesn't allow for some of the lessons in the book. And I guess we'll unpack this. But maybe just before we kind of go into that, I was wondering for people who are listening, like for parents or for youth workers, whoever, and they're like, yeah, I've heard attachment theory, and like they've maybe read an article about it, and they think they kind of understand. And people always talk about relationships now, like, oh, there's attachment types. Maybe could you give a definition for people, and then we can kind of work from that in terms of what is attachment theory, and why is it so important for children?
Yeah, well, there are a lot of definitions for attachment, and my experience is that a lot of parents think like attachment that's only for children with problems, right? And it for a lot of parents, it's a big word, attachment. Right? It's for professionals. It's for healthcare. Um, it's not for me and my family. That's what I hear a lot. But you said it right. It's about relationship. Attachment is about relationship, and it is about yeah. If I put it into the child's perspective, it's about an invitation to exist in the presence of one another, and um, it is about proximity. Is that the right word? Yeah. It is about proximity, and the instinctive need to proximity, and to connection, to feel connected. And it is in all of us. It is in all of
Mm.
us. But for children, it is an instinctive need to survive. And with young children, it's really easy for us to feel that they need us to survive because they cannot survive on their own. But if children get a little bit older, and even in their teen and puberty years, it's hard for us to understand that they still need us. Not only physically, but
Psychologically.
psychologically, yes.
Psychologically. There we go. Yeah.
And tripping over my words. And also emotionally,
Hmm.
but they still need to feel connected, like us. If for us adults, it's not the need is not that strong as it is with children because we developed our own identity. But for children, they're still growing into their own identity, and they need to feel connected to us to be able to develop this.
And Evelyn, can I just ask? I know we're going to probably delve into the book. I know we'll probably delve into the book in a bit more detail. I'm sure we will, and the themes that touches. But just so that we can kind of have like a foundation, what's like a brief synopsis, if that is possible, of what the book is about, just to kind of people who haven't read it, who may be interested, or maybe people who've never even heard of the book that you found so kind of transformational. What's like the brief kind of synopsis about it? What are the themes that it touches on?
A lot of teams, a lot. But to have the red cord, to have the core of it, it's about connection, of course. But it's also the big theme here is the title of the book is "Hold On to Your Kids," and there's a lot to say about this because, in my perspective, for me at that time, it was really important because there were a lot of problems in my family. And for me, the message was no matter how hard it is, no matter what the problems are, no matter what kind of behavior you're dealing with, you've got to hold on to the connection. For me, this was a big, um, the big thing that I got out of the book. But there's also a big theme in this book about peer orientation. And yes, of course, there are a lot of stuff where we can lose our children to because this instinctive need for attachment, for connection, for relationship. If it doesn't get, if it's not right on the place where it's supposed to be, to the adults at home who are responsible for you, if the attachment is not enough or not deep enough or not strong enough, instinctively children are scanning where to get it because they need it. So Dr. Neufeld says one of the big things in this society right now, one of the big problems is that children are looking for it outside of the context where they need to be attached, and they get more attached to other things like peers, and this is something I think in society we don't really see it because we think that peer orientation is good for children because they learn social skills, and we think that um, the peer orientation is helping them with their identity forming, but it's not. It's really not. And the big problem in our society is that we push our children way too young into this peer orientation, because we think that they need other people to develop, but all they need is strong, loving, warm relationship with the adults in their lives. That's what they need.
So it's really interesting you say this, Evelyn. Jim and I always love like a good example to kind of explain theories and concepts that we talk about on the podcast, and like real life stories or whatever they may be. And I mean, for some people who may not know, I went to boarding school at the age of 11, until I was 16, and then I came back home for 2 years to do my last 2 years of schooling before then going off to university, and then from university lived away from my home in university, so I was with peers, as you would say, and then I went from there straight, moved abroad to Madrid. So I think I've had a very untraditional upbringing in the sense that I didn't spend a lot of time at home throughout my childhood years, and even the first part of my life, kind of when I was at primary school, as we would call it in England, which is from about 4 to 10. My parents, as they worked a lot, my mum was a lawyer, my dad was a manager of a company, so I had a lot of au pairs who did the kind of the more day-to-day care that I needed, right? Because my parents would get home roughly 9 o'clock at night type thing. So I'm more than happy to kind of put myself at the altar here and to be dissected, because some of the things you're saying about the peer, kind of growing through peer stuff and all this stuff. That's how obviously boarding school was for me. I would also just maybe things might change throughout this conversation, but it's funny that when I tell people that I went to boarding school, especially people who haven't been to boarding school, the initial reaction is that they thought I must have been a bad child and that my family sent me away because they couldn't deal with me or whatever. It's like as if it was a punishment, basically. To which I always I find funny. I understand where the stereotype comes from, but actually that wasn't the case at all. It was simply the fact that in my local area there weren't very good schools. So my mum and dad, who wanted me to have the best education possible, sent me to a school that was further away. But because it was further away, obviously I couldn't travel 2-3 hours every morning, so I had to go to the boarding school part. The school actually had people who lived in the town and went there, and it had people who were in the boarding school who went to the school as well. Maybe 10-15% of us were boarders, and the rest all lived in the local area. And I personally, I'm sure maybe there's some things that we'll find out now that I haven't really that I haven't really noticed, but I personally think of it as a really informative and positive experience. I don't see it as something negative or I wish my parents never did that, yada yada. I really, really think it formed who I am in a good way. And I really, really enjoyed the experience. But I also understand that it's not for everybody. I think it takes a specific child to thrive in that environment. So, for example, my sister, she didn't go to boarding school. So even within the same family, there was one child who went and there was another child who didn't go. And so I recognize that there are difficulties and that it's not an answer for everybody, right? But like I said, I was there from 11 years old until 16. So I kind of wonder, with your experience, with your background, with your knowledge, what you think of that, and if you have any like questions regarding like how I grew up, and so maybe we can like delve into things a bit more and kind of dissect things.
Yeah, well, Seb, I'm very curious about when you were on boarding school, how close felt home. And
okay,
also an important topic, I think, is the development of relationship with your parents before, and how close felt home before you went to boarding school. I think this yeah, there are important questions, I think. Yeah, maybe you can tell something about this.
Yeah, so I think regarding at least in that time when I was younger, the kind of relationship that I had with my parents was very like a respect-based relationship. So my dad like went to the Navy, and he's quite old, he's from another generation, and so there was, when I was younger, it was very much like you respect your parents, and there wasn't necessarily like, listen, I know that they loved me, but it wasn't one of those relationships where it was, where you see on the films and whatever it may be. It was very much like to some extent, and maybe more so with my dad than my mum, but like there was a bit of fear in there, like make sure you act the right way and all this type of stuff. And so then when I went to boarding school, I would go back home once every 3 weeks, I think, once every 3 to 4 weeks, for a weekend. Okay. And then within those 3 to 4 weeks when I was still at the boarding school, we'd maybe call each other once a week just to like check in. But nothing like no major, it wasn't like a 3-hour phone call or anything. I was really happy to like be independent and not to have my parents there all the time. I didn't need that constant communication.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think what's funny is that since this has all happened and now that we've grown up and I have actually got a lot closer to my parents in my kind of adult years from my 20s onwards. My dad says that like he regrets sending me there and that he wished he kept me at home and saw more of me and all the rest of it, which is funny because he never ever expressed any opinion like that when I was at boarding school. So that's kind of an interesting kind of evolution. And I don't know if he always felt that way but just didn't want to tell me, or that's something he's only just discovered himself. But he always says now that like if he could, he wouldn't have sent me away. But like I said, I always found it, and that's the thing. I didn't feel like I was being sent away. That's the crux of it here, is that I never felt like I was being forced away or pushed out. It felt like something
Mm-hmm.
that actually was working best for me, and I really, really enjoyed it. And growing with other peers, and growing up with, because it was a mixed boarding school as well, so there was boys and girls of all different ages. So my best friends were like 18-year-old girls, and they would talk to me, and so we would grow kind of together. And that for me was a really, really big thing, and it helped me massively. So I really enjoyed the experience. But home, yeah, I went back when I needed to, but I was never desperate to go back ever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So maybe you felt more at home in boarding school than you did really at home.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Were there maybe I was thinking about, yeah, of course it's the most idealistic way to feel very close to your primary attachment relationship, yeah, your parents. But yeah, we talked about this too, Jim, before. We're not living in a perfect world, and sometimes, not sometimes, but a lot of times um, it doesn't go this way. We don't. I haven't met the person yet who says, "Well, I had a perfectly road of getting attached, and everything went perfect, and my parents were perfect," and But what's really important, I think, what I think about when I listen to your stories, Seb, is the adults in your life. Which people were around you, where you felt connected, and where you felt invited in their
Mm,
presence, and where did you put your trust? Where was it safe for you? Where were your examples? Your somebody to hold on to. I think
mm-hmm,
this is the importance in your story. But maybe at that time it was not your parents, but maybe it was somebody else. And
mm,
I think this is really important in your story. Yeah,
yeah.
where did you felt connected, and did you felt connected with an adult who was responsible for you, um, who could fill your needs? Yeah? Because
Mm,
friendship is a beautiful thing, I think, and friends around you, they can give you a lot, but they just cannot fill your attachment needs, not
mm,
in this age.
yeah.
And it's also a really wounding area, because how much can you rely on your friends in that age? They're searching too, and
Mm,
this is what I see a lot in schools nowadays. One day you're the king, and the other day you don't matter. It's a really wounding. It's They cannot give you unconditional, certain connection.
mm,
Not at that age. So this is the problem, right? Where did you find sure certainty in this connection.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I think, if I'm being honest, it's not to say that I didn't love my parents or anything like that, or I didn't feel safe with them. I definitely did. But if I look back, the reality is I don't think I ever, through my childhood years or my younger years anyway, before 20 onwards, let's say, I don't think there was ever really an adult where I felt like are truly connected and everything that you've just said. And Jim will know this, and but one of, I think, so friendship has always been a massive thing for me, because that is where I felt the connection and everything else. And so
Mhm.
I take friendship to some extent more serious than maybe other people, how they see their friends. Like, to me, friendship is as important as family, potentially even more so, I would say, because you ultimately choose your friends. Your family, that's a lottery. You can get lucky and that's great, but you can also get really unlucky, and that's not your fault. Whereas friends are a big reflection of who you are as well. And one of the things we talk about attachment, one of the things that I've realized about myself in these kind of years is I have a real problem with letting a relationship end, be that a friendship, a girlfriend, whatever it may be, any form of relationship. Because in my mind, I always think, if it worked once, if we were good once together as friends or wherever, we can be good, in the future. That connection's been created. So now it's just about maintaining it, right? And it's taken a lot for me to understand that that's true in some cases, but in a lot of cases that isn't true. And you have to also learn to let go. And sometimes I can be guilty of trying to give CPR to a body that is long gone, and I should just let that one go. And I'm still there pumping away, and everyone's going, Seb, this is over here, boy, leave it. And I'm like, no, we can still fix this, we can still make this better. And I think, to your point, it comes from that connection of that attachment of my friends when I was younger, where everything, we grew up together, we were like brothers and sisters, but I had 50 brothers and sisters. And to then let that die off felt like I was losing something, which maybe someone who grew up in a more traditional sense, who maybe felt connected to an adult in the way that you're talking about, maybe don't have those slight attachment issues that maybe I do.
Yeah, well, Seb, I think for everyone it's hard to let go.
Of course.
Separation is hard for every one of us, but it's a difference when you feel that you're okay. Even when this person is not with you anymore, that you are okay with yourself. It has to do with development of your own identity, and
Mm,
of course, there's. Yeah, I know your experience, Seb, for my own too.
yeah.
It's hard to grow and to know that you're fine with yourself and
Mm,
you're fine even when you have to let go. Yeah, it can be hard. Yes, of
yeah.
course.
What I think is really interesting as well is, I think the stereotype, and even I fell into this myself, is that independent people thrive in the boarding school experience or whatever it may be, and someone who's maybe more dependent on their parents, shouldn't go. So that would be like the example of where myself and my sister was. When I was growing up, I was always more independent. But on the flip
Yeah.
side of that, I actually think then, on the other way, it also means that I now have a dependency on. I've always had a lot of friends. I've always, like, good friends, like, not just, oh, hey, how are you, like, I have
Mhm.
10 plus people who I'd say these are my best friends, and like really mean it, because that's what I grew up in. Is like, I grew up in a house where there was 55 people and we were all brothers and sisters. And so it's created in my own world a necessity to have, you know, abundance of friendship. Whereas a lot of people I know who grew up in that maybe more traditional sense and maybe would class themselves as less independent than I am, they can thrive off 2 or 3 friendships, you know? Whereas for me to only have 2 or 3 friends feels quite limiting, and it feels quite scary, because I go, this isn't a lot of people here. If something happens with one of these people, that's a third of my friendship gone. Now I'm down to 2, and vice versa. Whereas I've got friends who have literally 1 or 2 or 3 friends. Everyone else, they're civil with, but there's only 2 or 3 people who they really count on, and they live their life that way, and they're perfectly happy to do so. And to me, that is like, that would be really quite scary to only have 2 or 3
Mm.
friends. And I think that's also because of the way I grew up in going to boarding school. Like I say, you grew up with 55 people and they're all your friends. So that becomes
Yeah.
the norm, not the other way around.
Yeah, well, you had to rely on them because
Mm,
who was there else, you know?
yeah.
That's the thing, right? Yeah, you know, you needed them and you needed to rely on them.
Evan, could I just chip in here because I'm seeing this, it's coming into me now. We had the fortune of interviewing a very interesting man called Brother Richard Hendrick a few conversations ago. And I don't know if it's ringing a bell for you, Seb, now, but he talks about initiation. And he says that young people are starved of initiation. We need to know that we're making a transition from childhood into adulthood, or we're getting more responsibility. And when we don't have this sort of initiation from adults, we will just find our own fake initiations through peers. So like young people that I used to work with, if they didn't have the initiation with parents or with teachers or whoever, they'll just say, oh, okay, well, whatever I'll do in the neighborhood that is respected, that will be in my initiation. And so that can be drinking at an early age. That can be having girlfriends at an early age. That can be robbing a car at an early age. All of these things, fighting, like all these things that, and I think that it's the interesting thing that you talk about. They align so much because ultimately, if we're basing our attachments and our kind of development based off other people our age who are also just looking around going, what are we going to do here? What we've no mentor, we've no parent to guide us, then you're going to just pick up stuff that is ultimately very adolescent, and it may feel strong, and it might, and there will be beautiful connections with it, but because it's not adult orientated, there's going to be these deep flaws. There's going to be these deep gaps, I guess, because a 14-year-old doesn't know it all, or a 16-year-old can't. Not that you have to know it all, even, but they probably haven't reached the point where they're familiar with their own attachments and they can kind of delineate between healthy attachment and unhealthy attachment.
Well, the thing is, you know, one of the ways that we feel connected to other people and how we attach is through sameness. And, you know, when we pick up the stuff that people, we pick up the stuff where people, where we're attached to. So when you have a little child, about 2 years old, they intimidate. No, not intimidate. They, how do you say this in English?
Imitate.
Yeah, imitate. They
Yeah.
imitate. They imitate their parent, right? You see this with, for example, little girls who put on makeup and put on the shoes of the mom and the dresses, or they talk like mom or dad, or they want to look like mom or dad. Like, this is really a superficial way of feeling attached to someone. If you find sameness. And the problem with peer orientation is, where your attachment is, there is also your imitation. And well, there are a lot of dynamics, I think, in your example of street culture. There's a lot of imitation. There's a lot of another way how we feel attached is through loyalty and ah, the English word.
Trust.
No, it's oh wait, we'll find it. Sorry.
No worries, take it down.
uh, yeah. Yeah, to belong.
Yeah.
To belong. So you see this with gangs, for example, they all have the same sign, they look like each other, they dress like each other, they talk like everybody does in this thing, and they feel like we belong to each other because we belong to this tribe. And this is the thing: if you learn it on the street, or you learn it with, or you're more attached to your peers, you're going to talk like your peers, to act like your peers, talk, dress like your peers. But when you're attached to your parents, you're going to talk like your parents. You're going to think like your parents at the first years, huh? And you're going to you pick it up at home from your parents. But yeah, of course, in street culture, there are a lot of dynamics. Also, a lot of frustration who comes from attachment frustration. There's a lot of there are a lot of dynamics. We could talk about it for hours. There are a lot of problems in peer orientation. Yeah.
Evelyn, I wanted to ask one question because the title of the book, keep hold of your kids. It's I come from, so my family's so my dad's Italian, and obviously I live in Madrid, so I now have a lot of Spanish friends, and the cultures are very, very similar. Whereas, obviously Jim being from Ireland and England, again, somewhat similar cultures. But one of the things I've seen in my own family from the Italian side and with friends from the Spanish side is maybe taking that title to its extreme. So they stay in the house a lot, what I would consider maybe too long. I'm talking, into their 30s, mid-30s. They're still living with their parents. Is there a risk that you can take that statement too far? What's the balance? So maybe people might say that, for example, my own example is maybe too extreme the other way. Maybe I shouldn't have gone to boarding school at 11. I should have stayed at home at least until I finished school. And then from there, maybe when I'm 16, 18, you can look at things. But is there a danger of where you become too dependent on your parents, when you become too dependent on that familiarity, so that anything and everything else seems like a potentially scary experience, and therefore you don't allow yourself the space to grow, to become your own person within a sense? Because I've always found that in those experiences that seem initially scary, going to boarding school, moving to a foreign country where you leave everyone behind, all of those things, they've made me, whilst in the initial stages they might have been really hard, they've actually they force you to grow, because you don't have any other options. You have to become dependent to some extent, because I can't, if I was at school and I was getting bullied, I can't just call my mum and dad, hey, this is happening. I have to sort that out myself. If something is happening in Spain where, I don't know, my paperwork's wrong or the job's not working or whatever, I can't just go, Mom, can you help me? I have to sort that out myself. And that's made me become a more adult man at the age that I'm at. And I look at people who have never, it's even like little things, they've never had to make their own food. Their parents still do all their washing, and they're 35 years old. They don't know how to iron a shirt, and all of these little things. It's like these are, to go towards Jim's saying, some levels of initiation that we have to go through in life that I feel like maybe robbed is a strong word, but they've been deprived of, because they've never been forced to grow. They've never been forced to do these things. And as we all know, human nature will always take the easiest path if it's presented to us. Very few people will actively choose a harder path if they can take the easier one. So I wonder for you, where's the balance there?
Well, you triggered me on the word forced. Because, Seb, there's, in healthy development, it's a word that doesn't exist. Because when things go idealistic, when a child needs to be dependent on their parents. And this is something in society we cannot digest. We don't like it. We want to push our child as soon as possible into independency. As soon as a child can do something for their own, we want them to do it by themselves. And I think this is a real big problem when you talk about attachment, because attachment is all about dependency. And we don't like it, because dependency is vulnerable. It is. And if we talk about our children to be, to invite our children to be dependent on us, it makes us scared. As a parent, I was really scared about the dependency of my children, because I thought, I'm a survivor too as a child. And I thought, and I felt like I need to teach them to survive. I need to teach them to take care of themselves because I did. So if they want to survive in the world, if they need to survive in the world, I have to push them to be independent.
Yeah.
Way too early, and that got me and my children into problems because my children were on a road to be more independent, that it was good for them at that age, and so to get
What
back to
age is
your
that, Evelyn? So just to jump in, what age is that we're talking about roughly?
it was well, from the time that we was 2 years old, maybe 4 years old. When my son was 4 years old, I was worried about everything. He didn't play with other children. He didn't listen. He wasn't really empathic. He was there were a lot of sorrows I had. Like I saw a lot of things that now I know is normal for a child of 4 because he's still developing. But yeah, I was really worried. Like I didn't even want them, if we go for a walk, then he took his little bike and I didn't want to carry it because he needs to carry it by himself. He needs to
Okay.
learn.
Yeah.
I'm not going to carry you. You need to walk by yourself. But that was all that it was all from my past, what I was giving to him. And so to get back to your question, children need to be dependent. And when they are dependent on us, and when they grow up in good relationship and they fell into attachment, to strong, deep attachment, then you don't need to force independence because it is something that will grow out of it. Attachment is it's the force of development. It is the force of identity development. And when children are good attached and they are brought up in a warm, safe world where there's a safe haven, they will become independent. They will want to be independent, Then you get this puberty age, and then they will make more room for their own thoughts and their own preferences and their own taste, and they will grow into independent individuals, and they will leave home one day because they want to get into the world. They're motivated individuals who are resilient, who are really curious about everything, and they take initiative, and they're healthy individuals. They will grow into it. There's no forcing needed.
Yeah.
So of course there can be a lot of reasons why 30-year-old individuals still live at home. There's a lot of problem with houses and with money, and there are a lot of problems who have a lot of impact on this. In Holland it's the same. Students who stay home longer. There are a lot of problems in housing and stuff. But children who don't want to leave home. Is, of course, you have to look at the broad perspective of what's really going on here. But do they want to leave home? Huh?
Yeah. I wonder. There's two strains that come up here. So the first thought is, I suppose as well, and obviously Jim and I can't really speak on this because we're not parents as of yet. But you often hear that a lot of parents struggle when it comes to that age of their children, searching for that independence and wanting to make their own way in the world. And a lot of parents struggle with kind of letting the bird flee the nest. It's like no, it's because ultimately they've been used to 18 years, 20 years, 25 years, whatever it may be, of being needed, and there's a safety in that, isn't there, from the parent side of things, of like, I know that my kid needs me and every day I've got to make him dinner, and there's a safety within that role. And then all of a sudden one day your son goes, thanks mum, it's been great, but I'm going to move to Budapest, and you're like, and that can be quite jarring for the parent. So I'd like you to speak on that. But then also intertwined is that you were saying, in an ideal world, the good attachment creates a dependency, but not an over dependency, and eventually that child will want to, find their own independence. That will come naturally. But unfortunately, we don't live in an ideal world, and there are people who, we don't control our own timelines. And, you might, as a parent, you might die or earlier than we would like to think. You might not die when you're 85 years old and your kid's now 40 and everything's fine. You might die when your kid's 10 or whatever it may be. And I wonder if maybe there's also that thing of like, I need to make the most of the time I have with this child now to make them as prepared for the world that I can do, this, which can be a brutal world, so that if the worst case scenario happens, they're better placed, rather than let's live on this idealistic timeline that we can do things slowly but surely with love, with connection. But then once that gets cut short, am I leaving my son or my daughter exposed? Is it not better for me to kind of, like, you, I know you don't like the word, but to force the issue, to push things a bit quicker so that they're more prepared? And then if something terrible happens, or divorce happens, or whatever it may be, they're a bit more, we haven't waited 25 years to get to this point. I've kind of taught them the lessons they need to learn at 10, type thing. That's your two kind of thoughts on those different strands.
Well, it depends on your definition about surviving. How. Yeah, of course, as a parent, I think about this. What can I give my children to be resilient? About every day. My son is going to a city. We live in a small town next to a city. I think he travels 15 minutes by train when he was 12 years old. And it was not a nice experience for me, because it was a first big let go experience for me. And he's in the big world, on his high school, and going by train, sometimes in the evening, not too late, but sometimes in the evening when he comes from friends. And that's not easy. But how do I equip my children to function in this world, even when I'm not there? And I think it's not pushing them into independence. I think the best way that I can equip my children is to know who they are, and to rely on our relationship even when I'm not here, and to have a soft heart, because it's really important to if you want to, in life you really need to digest a lot of pushbacks, a lot of unexpected things, a lot of things going differently like you wanted it to, or to, there in life you are depending on your own choices and on the choices of others. And a lot of times, especially when you're young, you have to deal with a lot of consequences of choices of other people, and you're not going to like them every time. But you need to have your tears about the stuff that don't work for you. And I think this is the only way to survive. You have survival in a way of building up a survival system, but that's not really survival, is it? You don't live through the experience, but you protect yourself from the experience.
You get by.
Yeah, and that's something different. It's if you don't have a soft heart, you cannot feel the connection with other people or with yourself. And this is a really big topic in attachment science. To be able to feel connection, your brain and survival is not going to help you to feel connected to other people, because you're not open to it. You're just not open to it. And that's the thing. I'm really convinced the best way that I can equip my children is to have warm relationship. My mom died when I was 20 years old, and I was really not my brain was not a 20-year-old woman. I was not developing I was not developed to it yet. But yeah, still, I'm 42 now, and I still find peace and rest in this relationship. And even when she's not here, but I can feel her when I think about her. Relationship is forever. It is really forever. Yeah.
It's beautiful, Evelyn, hearing you speak about this. I love this conversation, and it's also why I love this approach to attachment and this perspective on attachment, because it's quite contradictory to the culture, right? It's counterculture. Like Seb's coming at it from a very practical, this is how society works. You have to learn how to do this and you have to learn how to do that. And we don't really care how you feel about it. And we don't really care about the quality of your relationships. You just got to do these things. And then it's like the humanity of it has shrunk a little bit, where it's more important to learn how to do things and to be here and to say that rather than how to feel. And I like the work with attachment because it's exploring people. It's inviting people to explore. Oh, well, maybe there's another way of looking at this. And because I often think about the questions that Seb's asking as well. And the one thing that I think about is how the importance of a child to feel safe in their experience, right? So if a child feels safe with the parent or the guardian or whoever, and they're like, oh, I say this and I feel this, and if it's held, it's like it's absolutely encouraging them to then be more themselves as they go on, rather than if it's peer orientated and you're like, all right, well, I better say that I actually like football and that that I like these clothes and that I like this music and that, yeah, I don't care about that stuff. All that only because I can fit in with my peers, rather than it's actually how I feel. And you can see that split so early, and particularly if you work with young people or you have kids, right? You can see that split so early. The kids have that pull, like you said, they want to feel connected to other people and they want to be in with the community. But as a result, they're abandoning often a lot of actually how they feel and what's going on with them. But if they feel safer and safer with their own feelings and their experience, then it's more likely that they can go, oh, well, I like this community, but I don't like that they do that. But I still like them and I can spend some time with them and it's not as radical. And I think this is why I love your work, and this is why I love Gordon Neufeld's work, because it is like opening up this door to see, oh, actually, it isn't just this image of a parent holding a child all their life, just by their side, going like, I'm not letting go,
Yeah.
not letting
No.
go.
Well, actually, it's, there are a lot of people who are very anxious about attachment when their child is born, right? They want to, no, don't carry it, don't come too close, But, well, I think it's really interesting about to learn about attachment. It's so much more than the four styles, because I think it's, to be honest, I think it's really old fashioned. And to be honest, as a professional, how do you work with it? That's what's the message? How can you work with children if you only look like this? You need to have the bigger picture, and you need to. For me personally, it's my opinion. I really like to have a bigger picture of attachment, but also to really understand how it works from the inside out, and not only for me, because attachment is about is two ways, It's about attachment from the child, from the mother to a child, and that's where we talk a lot about the parent-child relationship. But when do we talk about the child-parent relationship? And from the perspective of the child, and that's what I do in my practice, to help parents to understand their children from their perspective, from the perspective of the child. So yeah, sometimes question like, does this child feel safe with you, do you think? Because there are a lot of parents who say sometimes they feel a little bit threatened by when we investigate the attachment relationship, like, no, I really love my child, and yeah, of course, I give them everything that they need. Well, it's not about this, I told you before, Jim, I haven't met the parent yet who said, well, I don't like my child. Yes, that's not true. Sometimes when parents get frustrated, they say this to me. Yes, of course, don't even like my child anymore. Of course, that can happen. But I haven't met the child yet, the parent yet, who said, well, I don't feel any love inside of me for my child. When you strip it down to the essence, there is love. There is love. And sometimes it gets overshadowed by problems, of course. But yeah, there is love. And but the question is not that you love your child. The question is your child able to receive it? And is your child, does it feel enough connected? Does it feel connected, and does it feel strongly and deep enough connected with you to feel this warmth and safety and trust? And can a child rest in your relationship? And it is about consistency, it is. So yeah, unconditional attachment. Yeah, to feel secure. Yeah, like today I'm fine, and tomorrow I will be also, and even the day after when I'm doing stuff that you don't like, there's still relationship. And I think this is a big problem in society right now, because there are a lot of people, a lot of children who don't feel this. They don't feel it. And it's not because parents don't want to offer it, but I think when I look at myself and the parents I serve in my practice, we lost this language, and we need to learn it again. We need to learn.
I think that's a really important point, is the language, because obviously you and Jim are way more read up on this this theory, and as Jim says, it's quite counterculture. When I first hear it, like, some of the words, they automatically are like jarring. Like, we talk about how creating a dependency on the parent relationship, right? In English, dependency has a stigma. It's a bad. If you have a dependency on anything, that means you have a crutch. You can't live life without this thing. It's seen as a negative thing, right? And it's like, if we could even just, within this very small circle, if we could just like destigmatize that word within the environment of attachment theory, I think that would allow the conversation to reach areas or reach people that maybe automatically dismiss it. Because when you say kids should be dependent on their parents, it's like, no, that's the opposite of everything we're taught. Everything we're taught is how we should be independent, how we should be self-sufficient, right?
Yeah.
And I think the reason for that is, I don't know if I'm sure there's maybe a saying similar in Holland, but in English there's a saying that it takes a village to bring up a child, right?
Yeah.
And if you take that at its essence, what that means is you're dependent on not just your parents, not just two people, on a whole village worth of people for yourself to be brought up correctly, right? But that's a real scary thing as well, because like you said before, we kind of get in this place where as we grow, we not only depend on our own decisions, but on the decisions of other people and the actions of other people. And so to then put your faith of like, hey, my personal growth is also dependent on other people, not just myself, which is a reality of human nature, but it's a really scary thing. Whereas if you go, oh, I can just grow up myself and I'm in control of everything, you limit the risk factor to a certain extent, because there's only one variable, and that's yourself, as opposed to 50 variable, which is 50 different people, right? And it's like, I've had this learning very recently, in the sense that I've gone through a personal problem, a breakup with a long-term girlfriend, and up until this point, I'd always been very self-sufficient, or like to think of myself as self-sufficient. And it took like this kind of rupture within my life, like this earthquake, to go, I don't know how to handle this by myself, and I don't know how to get through this by myself. It's my first breakup, so I don't have any experience that I can I can rely on self-sufficiently. So I reach out to Jim, I reach out to my parents, I reach out to other friends. And actually that process within itself has actually been really reassuring to know that, hey, there is a village of people behind you who are there, that safety net is there for when you fall, right?
Yeah.
But it takes that leap of faith to actually reach out, because you think in the worst case scenarios that you're going to reach out and they're not going to be there for you, and then it's like, oh god, I knew I should have been self-sufficient this whole time. And actually that doesn't, so we do have a dependency, even if we don't want to admit it. Like, I always thought I was very independent, but I've realized that the dependency is there, and actually it's necessary, because you can't move forward in life by yourself. And as Jim said, you can get through things, yes, but does that mean you're better when you come out of it the other side? Or have you just kind of like tucked your head under your knees and you've just got through it and it's fine? Or have you actually come out of it the other end and gone, hey, listen, that was a horrible experience, but I am better for living it. And like you're saying, have a soft heart and taking it in and allowing, and like taking the hits, and like sitting with those hits. And that's like a thing that I think within this, like in turn, is like really is a problem, is that stigma of dependency. We see it as such a bad thing. And actually, if we could just change that mindset, it would be huge.
Well, it's a huge thing in society, when children are asking us unconsciously every day, can I depend on you? Can I trust you to take care of me? Can I trust you to fill my needs? Am I safe with you? Am I enough for you? Do you like me? Do you love me? And they ask these questions to their teachers, to their parents, to all the village of adults around them, because, Seb, you're an adult, and you're telling this beautiful story about reaching out to people when you need them. But children do not do this. Young children, they signal us that they need us, but they need us on another level. And well, that's really a big thing, as these are the questions that really touched my heart when I was in problems with my own children and my own motherhood. That this did really touch my heart to understand these questions my child is asking me, and how I was not able at that moment to answer them. I really had to learn to be the answer to my child, and to take initiative to fill his needs before he was going to ask me, because this is a really important thing in Dr. Neufeld really has a nice metaphor which he uses, like the invitation to be presence of another is, you can compare it to a table, a feast table. When there's a feast, when you have a celebration, there's always too much food on the table. There's too much food to eat, to digest, to be, your love for your children, and not only your love, but also your care and your guidance, and you're the orientation point to your children. And your protection, it needs to be bigger than what your child is asking for, because this is the fulfillment. A child needs to feel that there's more than enough. And you can, if you take it to daily life, you can see it in the eyes and the expression of the people who love you. When they see you, when they hear you, they're happy to see you, and you can feel it if you're welcomed into somebody's presence. You can feel it, you can see it, you can feel it. And This is the most important thing. This is what I teach parents. The first thing that I teach parents is, especially when there are a lot of problems, let your child see that you still love them. Let them see that they're welcome, even if they do stuff you don't like, or even if they have a lot of behavior that's hard on you. You need to let your child know that even with these problems, even with this behavior, it will not break the connection. This is one of the first things that I teach parents to do. It's so important.
Thanks for that, Evelyn. Because I actually wanted to place some emphasis on this. Is one is that, like, exactly what you're saying, and two, just to kind of make it to be a partner, is that there could be someone listening to this and they could have a nephew that is 1, they could have a baby that has just been born, or they're pregnant, or they could have a kid that's 15 or a kid that's 20 or 25. And I think what the beautiful thing about this, and you've mentioned this, we spoke about this before, is that while we like to think of ideal circumstances, grounded in this whole philosophy is that it's never, quote unquote, too late. And that connection, even if you think, oh my God, no, my kid's 20 now and we don't really have that good of a connection, there's room for connection if we can kind of ask ourselves those questions that you were asking there.
Yeah, well, I heard that you say, Seb, with your father, he's telling you that, hey, I missed you. Maybe I didn't make the right decision, but I missed having relationship with you. And in what he told you, he is inviting you into relationship and to it's never too late. No, it's not. And it's never too late. And maybe your situation can look very hopeless, but this is also the title of the book, Hold On to Your Kids. Like, even when it seems like you cannot do anything anymore for a child, you have to try, because everyone is worth to try. Even if your child is a criminal or has a really aggressive behavior or whatever you're struggling with, it's never too late for a relationship. Never. Even when your child is sending you out the message, I don't want you anymore, I don't need you anymore. You are the adult and you are responsible for the relationship. And yeah, with small things, but we can talk for this for hours, but small things are the first step. Always. Small little things, the first step. And the first step lies in your eyes and in your nods and in your smile and it's the first step.
I love that, Evelyn. Thank you. As you said, we could talk all day about this. We really might have to do a part 2.
Yeah,
But,
of course. Yeah, I am open for it.
great.
Yeah.
Because what I wanted just for this podcast was for people who maybe had heard it and they maybe have a misconception about it, or wanted to learn a bit more, or they were just like, yeah, I have kids in my life now, I have young people in my life, let me learn a bit more. This was just kind of just a teaser, a kind of, hey guys, like this, these are some gentle, as you say, there's lots and lots to it. It's very nuanced. You've been studying it for years and you're going deeper and deeper. But if people are interested in you specifically, I can leave your website in the show notes if they want to reach out to you. Maybe do you do Zoom calls, Evelyn?
Yes, Zoom calls, and of course they can check the website of the Neufeld Institute. It's based in Canada, but we're all over the world, so they can find somebody in their neighborhood, in the area. But also, yes, of course, they can reach out to me. Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Evelyn. I love this stuff. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, me too. Thank you, and thank you, Seb, for sharing your story. It's
Yeah.
really
No worries.
interesting. Yeah.
Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure.